Hey everybody, welcome back. We're going to take a look today at a fun and useful data visualization exercise, creating choropleth maps in Stata. So what is a choropleth map? You see these all the time, right? This is where different regions are shaded different colors to represent uh, a specific outcome for a given variable. So for example, on the news, they're talking about rich countries versus poor countries. They show a map of the world. Rich countries are one color, poor countries are another color. We're talking about the coronavirus, right? Which counties in California have higher rates of coronavirus? They show the map, and the deeper the color red, the more cases there are per capita, etc. So, slightly more specifically, in terms of vocabulary, right? A choropleth map, simply put, a map used to visualize data. And once you kind of have this in your toolkit, it's going to come up a lot to be really useful to kind of spice up your paper, your report, whatever it is that you're working on. Um, like I said, a better definition, a map where each sub-region is colored or shaded to indicate the intensity of a given variable. So what is this going to look like? At the end of our little example today, we're going to create a map exactly like this. So in this case, we have obviously the map of the world, where each country is shaded according to its per capita GDP. So the darker the color blue, the higher their per capita GDP. But again, once you have the basic idea down, lots of different applications. So that's where we're going today. So the steps, step number one, we're going to need a quote unquote master data file. So this is going to contain the variable of interest, in our case, per capita GDP, as well as a variable, a column that has a unique geographic identifier, country name or country code, etc. So again, depending on what you're going to use this for, that's going to change exactly what that's going to look like, but you need that basic category filled, okay? So that'll be our starting point. Once we have that, then we need the so-called Shapefile files, and these are files that contain the data used to generate the maps. So this is kind of our geographic coordinates of all of the borders between countries. And there's a variety of places where we can find those. Luckily, they're out there on the internet already pre-created for us, and we just need to grab those. And then the next step is we need to make those files readable from within Stata. So we'll use a command called spshape2dta. Does exactly what it says. It takes a shape file and turns it into a DTA file that Stata is going to be able to read. And this is a package you have to download. So before you get too far into this, go ahead and within Stata type ssc install spshape2dta, and you'll have that ready to go. And again, it's going to do a lot of stuff that we're not going to utilize, but you'll have it ready to go for our simple example here. Then we just have to do an old-fashioned merge, right? So we've got our master data over here with the variable we want to represent. We've got the map data over here. We got to combine those into a single file from within Stata. And that's where most of your problems are probably going to come up. That's probably the trickiest part of this whole thing. Then we just need to ask Stata to create a map for us in the form of kind of what Stata is viewing as a graph, right? And we're going to use another package you'll have to download there, grmap. Again, there's other commands out there that'll do something similar. This is what we'll use in our example here. So let's get started with step number one by taking a look at our example data. So let's jump into Stata, and I've already got some data to play with here. So I just used the command wbopendata, comma, indicator, and then in parentheses, the name of the variable, the World Bank Open Data code, in this case for per capita GDP, clear and long, so it'll be in that column format. And I've got all this going on here. So I'll put the command that I use there in the description, so you can just copy and paste it. But I definitely recommend, if you haven't already, exploring that wbopendata command. Really nice, convenient way to get country level macroeconomic data. Okay, so let's jump into the data browser here and think about what it is that we're going to need to focus on. So right off the bat here, the first two columns are country code. So we have a 3-letter code for each country, and then country name, the text name of the country. And you see we have in alphabetical order Aruba ordered first. And we have all of these different observations that are Aruba, then Afghanistan, et cetera. So this is a panel data set. So the default in World Bank Open Data is to get multiple years all the way back to 1960. And you see a lot of missing observations here. So for the purposes of creating our map, we'll just use kind of the most recent commonly available year. So nobody has GDP calculated yet for 2020, a lot of missing observations for 2019. So maybe let's go back to 2018. Okay, so we'll go back here and we'll just say keep if year equals 2018. Bunch of observations are dropped. So now we turn it from a panel into a cross section, and let's browse that again. So now each row is a single country, except notice a couple exceptions here. We also have these aggregates, right, which can be very useful. So for the region across multiple countries, Central Europe and the Baltics, the World Bank automatically creates this category. Well, we're not going to want to include that in the map, right? So we can get rid of all of these aggregates. So that's region name equal aggregates. So we can say drop if region name equals, and because it's a string variable, we've got to put it in quotes, aggregates, and that drops 47 more observations. And we might also want to drop countries who has a missing observation. Let's go drop if per capita GDP is missing equals dot. So that takes out 28 more observations. So let's see what we're left with. Let's summarize our per capita GDP. So we're still got 189 countries. That's pretty darn good. And that's going to be the basis for our merge, okay? So let's go ahead and save this file somewhere convenient. I've already created a folder called maps. I'd recommend you do something similar so we can put all the necessary files in the same place. So we'll just call this World Bank data. And that'll be our master file, okay? And what I might recommend at this point is just making note of these first two variables, country code and country name, right? Because when we merge the files together, we need to have exactly the same name for whatever the identifier is that's going to be shared across the two files. So I got my pad of paper here ready. I'm going to go ahead and just jot that down. So in our master file, we have country code, all lowercase, no spaces. And that would be ideal to be able to use that as our identifier. If that fails, we have country name, which is the text. And I'm just going to write down exactly how it appears here. So now, step number 2, we got to jump onto the internet to find our shape files. If you Google country shapefile, you'll see a variety of freely available sources. I'm going to go ahead and link to this one. So this is the data hosting site from the University of Minnesota. They're probably best known for hosting micro-level census data from across countries, really nicely organized, and you have to log in, register to be granted access to that data. But their shape files, their GIS boundary files here, are freely available, right? So if you click on World Map here for our example, and you download it, you'll end up with a folder like this. If we open this up, we have a variety of files here denoted World Countries 2020, and then with various appendices, identifiers here, file types. And we're only going to need 2 of these, right? We're going to want the dbf file, the .dbf, so that's going to be the database file. And I'm going to put this into my maps folder that already contains my World Bank master data file. And then we also need the SHP, the shape file here. So we're going to take that, and we're not going to need to use anything else, right? For anything that we're going to be taking a look at. So we can go ahead and jump back into Stata now, and I've got 2 windows of Stata running. There we go. So setting aside the master data, now we're going to start with a blank data file. And here's what I would recommend. Going back into the, get rid of that, going back into the maps folder that we've created here, we're going to need to access each of these world countries 2020.dbf and shp files. Just a kind of a tip that was given to me, just go ahead and rename those just to make sure that they have exactly the same name between them, and it's something that you can easily type out and not forget. So since these are country level shape files, we're just going to call them countries, plural, right? So I've got two files called countries, and we're going to need to refer to those in Stata. So what we're going to be asking Stata to do is open those files up, combine them, and generate a third file that's going to be countries.dta. And probably the easiest way to make sure that we're going to the right place here is to change the working directory of your Stata session. So if you go to File, Change Working Directory, and make your working directory your maps folder, right? So now that'll be the default where Stata is going to go to find the files that it's looking for. Okay, so I've already done that, so I'm ready to go. Okay, so we are now going to apply the command sp shape to DTA, and we're going to apply it to the files, right? The database file and the shape file, and combine those into a DTA file. So this is where knowing the names comes in handy. So they both shared the same name, so that's crucial. So we type in countries, and then Stata is going to go to the folder that we designate as our working directory. So we want that working directory to be the maps folder that contains those files. So that's going to be here. So if we go up within Stata, go to File, Change Working Directory, make sure that working directory is where you contain these files. That way we don't need to write out the whole path, right? And then we hit Enter, and this is going to be creating that DTA file within that folder, right? So nothing's going to come up here, but if we go back to our folder, we should now find, before we just had the countries DBF, the countries SHP in our World Bank data, well, now we've got this DTA file that's going to contain everything that we need in a Stata readable format, right? So let's go ahead and go back into Stata and take a look at this. So let's go File, Open, Countries, DTA, and browse and take a look. And we've got some good news here and some not so good news, right? So the good news is we have these variables created here, the X and Y coordinates. So those are the centers of the of each country on our grid, right? And then the other file has the information used to create the borders, right? That's good news. The other good news is we have this country name column that, again, uniquely identifies each row as a specific country. The not so great news is this kind of shapefile information that we downloaded has a country code as a numeric value, a three and sometimes 4-digit code, but that's not in our master file, right? So remember, the master file had the country name, and then its country code was a 3-letter abbreviation for each country. So the only shared information that we have between this file and our master file is the string or the text of the country name. So we're just going to have to hope that those match up. Most of the time they are going to, but this is where things might get a little bit tricky. So one thing I would recommend, no matter what source you're using, is do something like this, right? So if we go Tab, Country Name, and what you want to see is all of these equal to 1, right? So we want to see there's only one observation that contains our specific country name. And we just passed by one here. Palestine Terriers Gaza Strip actually appears twice. And it looks like this is just a mistake in generating this data file. But that's going to bring the merge process to a screeching halt right there. So what I would probably recommend doing is just dropping that observation, I should say those two observations from this shape to DTA file, right? Because again, each observation, each row has to be uniquely identified for Stata to be able to splice and merge those together. So I would probably recommend something like this. So if I go browse the data and see if we can find, trying to cheat and just be able to copy and paste it. There we are, Palestine. Territories Gaza Strip, so we'll copy that and just go drop if country name equals, and then in quotes, Palestine territories Gaza Strip. Two observations deleted. Okay, that's good to go. So we can go ahead and save this with that newly abbreviated data set. So now we need to merge these files together. So the identifier is going to be country name instead of country code, right? But remember, we jotted it down, right? In the master file, country name was all lowercase, no spaces, no underscores. So let's go ahead and make those match. So let's rename country name as it appears here as country name as it appears in the master file. Now we should be able to merge the two together. So, and we can do it either way. The other file has already been saved to our disk. So we should be able to go from within the map file here, data, combine data sets, merge two data sets. And the variable that we're going to merge on is country name. And the file that we want to find is our World Bank data. So let's go ahead and OK. And we've got, let's see, some degree of success here. Let's go ahead and browse. So country name appears. And we've got all the original data that we had in the mapping file. And now we've got the World Bank data. And we have some missing observations. So some of these did not quite match together, either because it was missing in one of the files and not the other, or perhaps there was some problem with the text here. So this is where you're going to want to spend a fair amount of time, right? So if you're doing this just for kicks, just for fun, you're pretty much good to go. You've got enough countries to show a good story. If your job or your grade or your thesis depends on it, you're going to want to go through this line by line and make sure you figure out where the matches worked and where they didn't. But for the purposes of speeding this along, we can now create a map. So we can go ahead and try to create a map here. So remember, the command was grmap. And if we type that in, we're going to get this error, right? So variable underscore ID should never be missing. So we've got this spatial unit ID variable here. So some commands in Stata are able to read right over missing observations. This is not one of them. So we're going to need to get rid of those missing observations. Like we said, make sure you understand why your observations are missing, where that merge process may have gone awry. So let's drop if underscore ID is missing equals dot. So we have 30 observations that are going to be lost there. Whether those are actual countries or not is a different question. Then we type in grmap and we sit back and wait. Okay, so what we have here is the baseline blank map, right? So this utilizes only the information in the shape files that we've, again, turned into DTA files. So the next step is use that same command, the grmap, to overlay that per capita GDP information. That's what we really want to see. Okay, so now let's go ahead and try to generate a map with our per capita GDP data overlaid. So we go grmap, the name of the variable, and this will just be the default. So this command has a built-in default way of separating values into regular intervals, right? Much like the histogram command creates consistent bins, right? And then looks at the frequency within those bins. This does the same thing and then applies the appropriate shade to each shape, in this case, each country, as you go up, right, in those intervals. If you go help grmap, you'll see lots of different options in terms of user specified ways of separating out those countries. Let's just see what this is going to look like. And there we have it. So lots more stuff you can do, lots of different options that we didn't get into, but that should get you started with making some maps in Stata. So enjoy and thanks for watching.